The gravel road to the cabin stretched endlessly through the Montana wilderness, each mile taking Sarah further from civilization and deeper into her late husband's secrets. 6 months pregnant and still reeling from Mark's sudden death in a car accident, she clutched the rusty key he'd hidden in their safety deposit box, a key to a property she never knew existed. The cabin sat like a wounded animal against the tree line, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon light, revealing a simple one-room space that felt familiar yet wrong. But it was the loose floorboard near the stone fireplace that changed everything. Beneath it lay a hidden cellar filled with surveillance equipment, fake passports bearing Mark's face with different names, and photographs of her, hundreds of them, dating back to years before they'd ever met. The man she'd married, the father of her unborn child, had been watching her long before their first date. Sarah's knees buckled as one final photo slipped from a manila envelope, her own driver's license from college, with a red X marked across her face. Who was her husband, really, and why had he been hunting her? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The photo trembled between her fingers as reality shifted around her like tectonic plates. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her distress, and Sarah pressed her free hand to her swollen belly. Everything she thought she knew about her life was crumbling into dust. She forced herself to look at the driver's license again. It was definitely hers, the awful photo from her sophomore year at Northwestern, the one where she'd forgotten it was renewal day and showed up with unwashed hair and no makeup. The red X was drawn in thick marker, deliberate and violent. But what made her stomach lurch wasn't the mark itself. It was the date stamp on the back of the photo. Someone had printed this 3 years before she'd met Mark at that coffee shop in Chicago. The coffee shop where he'd accidentally bumped into her, spilling his latte on her textbooks. Their meet-cute story. The one they'd laughingly told at their wedding reception just 18 months ago. Sarah's hands shook as she rifled through more of the photographs scattered across the concrete floor of the cellar. There she was, leaving her apartment in college, walking to her car after her job at the campus bookstore, studying in the library, laughing with friends at a bar. The dates went back even further, 4 years, 5 years. Some of the photos were grainy, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. Others were close enough that the photographer must have been standing just feet away. He'd been watching her for years before they met, stalking her. The surveillance equipment hummed quietly in the corner. Monitors, recording devices, and communication gear that looked far more sophisticated than anything a normal person would own. Sarah moved toward it on unsteady legs, her pregnancy making her movements awkward. The monitors were dark, but indicator lights showed the system was active. She touched one of the keyboards and a screen flickered to life, displaying what looked like a building schematic. Her blood went cold as she recognized the layout. It was her apartment building in Chicago, their apartment building where she still lived. Red dots blinked on the screen. Cameras, she realized. He'd been watching her even after they were married. "Oh, God!" she whispered, bile rising in her throat. "What were you?" The fake passports were spread across a metal desk. Sarah picked one up with trembling fingers. Mark's face stared back at her, but the name read David Chen. Another showed him as Michael Rodriguez. A third passport was Canadian, identifying him as Marcus Thompson. All the photos were recent, all bore official stamps that looked genuine. Her legs gave out and she sank into the chair at the desk, her mind reeling. The man she'd loved, the man whose child she carried, had been living multiple lives, multiple identities. The question wasn't who was her husband, it was which husband was real. A manila folder caught her attention, labeled simply Sarah in block letters. Inside were documents that made her heart stop. Copies of her birth certificate, social security card, medical records, even her college transcripts. Bank statements going back years, credit reports, a complete dossier of her entire life. At the bottom of the folder was a single sheet of paper with a government letterhead she didn't recognize. Most of it was redacted with thick black lines, but she could make out fragments: target acquired, Operation Nightfall, and at the bottom, a signature that definitely wasn't Mark's. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Sarah realized she was hyperventilating. She forced herself to take slow, deep breaths. She needed to think clearly. Mark was dead, killed in what she'd been told was a random accident on the interstate. But now she wondered if anything about his death had been random at all. A sound from above made her freeze. Footsteps on the cabin floor. Someone else was here. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, a ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through dense pine forests that seemed to press closer with each passing mile. Sarah adjusted her grip on the steering wheel, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light filtering through the windshield. The baby kicked, a sharp reminder of the precious cargo she carried and the reason she couldn't turn back now, no matter how much doubt gnawed at her. She'd been driving for 3 hours since leaving the city, following directions David had scrawled on a napkin during one of their rare conversations about the cabin. "It's our sanctuary," he'd called it, his eyes taking on that distant look she'd learned not to question. "Someday, when things settle down at work, we'll spend whole summers there." That someday had never come. David's job at the consulting firm had consumed him, keeping him away for weeks at a time on mysterious projects he couldn't discuss due to confidentiality agreements. She'd accepted his explanations because she loved him, because she trusted him, because the alternative, that her husband was lying to her, was unthinkable. Now, with his life insurance money dwindling and medical bills mounting, the cabin represented her only chance at stability. She could work remotely, raise the baby in clean mountain air, and maybe find some peace in the place David had loved enough to keep paying taxes on for 7 years. The GPS signal had died 20 minutes ago, leaving her to navigate by landmarks David had mentioned: the rusted mailbox shaped like a trout, the bridge over Whisper Creek, the turnoff marked by a lightning-split oak. Each mile took her deeper into wilderness that felt both beautiful and ominous, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. When she finally spotted the lightning-scarred oak, Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The dirt road beyond looked barely passable, rutted and overgrown with weeds that scraped against her car's undercarriage. Branches reached across the path like gnarled fingers, and she had to stop twice to move fallen logs that blocked her way. The cabin appeared suddenly, a modest A-frame structure nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. Cedar shingles weathered to silver grey caught the dappled sunlight, and a stone chimney rose from the peaked roof like a sentinel. It looked exactly as David had described it: rustic, peaceful, isolated. Too isolated. Sarah killed the engine and sat in the sudden silence, broken only by the whisper of wind through pine needles and the distant call of a hawk. The nearest neighbor was probably miles away. Cell service was non-existent. If something happened to her out here, if she went into early labor or had complications, she pushed the thought away and gathered her purse and overnight bag. The baby would be fine. She would be fine. This was temporary, just until she figured out her next move. The front door key was exactly where David had said it would be, under the third stone in the decorative border around the porch planter. As Sarah lifted the flat river rock, something cold settled in her stomach. How did David know the key's location so precisely? He'd told her his uncle had left him the cabin, but Uncle Robert had been dead for 8 years. Who had been maintaining this place? Who had kept the key hidden in such a specific spot? The door opened with a soft creak, revealing an interior that smelled of cedar and something else, a faint clinical odor like disinfectant. Sarah frowned. The cabin looked clean, too clean for a place that had supposedly sat empty. No dust on the surfaces, no musty smell of disuse. The refrigerator hummed quietly in the compact kitchen, and when she opened it, she found it stocked with basics: milk, eggs, bread, even prenatal vitamins. Someone had known she was coming before she'd even decided to come herself. Sarah sank onto the leather couch, her mind reeling. The vitamin bottle felt heavy in her hands, its weight somehow containing all her growing doubts about the man she'd married. David's long absences, his vague explanations about work, his reluctance to talk about his past, details she'd dismissed as quirks now took on a sinister cast. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if responding to her spike of adrenaline. Sarah pressed her hand to her belly and tried to breathe normally. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe David had arranged for someone to stock the cabin before his death, knowing she might need it. Maybe he'd been planning to surprise her with a baby moon getaway. But even as she tried to convince herself, Sarah knew something was wrong. The feeling settled into her bones like winter chill, and she couldn't shake the sensation that she was being watched from the shadows of the surrounding forest. The photograph trembled in Sarah's hands as she stared at her husband's face, David's face, attached to a body in military fatigues she'd never seen before. The name beneath read Marcus Chen, Special Operations. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto the dusty floor of the hidden room, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. This had to be some mistake. A case of mistaken identity, perhaps. David had never mentioned military service. He'd told her he'd worked in IT consulting before they met, traveling for various tech companies. She'd seen his resume, his references, even his college transcripts from Northwestern. With shaking fingers, she reached for another file. This one contained bank statements for accounts she'd never heard of, each bearing the name Marcus Chen. The deposits were substantial, six-figure sums appearing monthly for the past 5 years, the same 5 years she'd been married to David. Sarah's breath came in short gasps. The baby kicked hard against her ribs as if sensing her distress. She pressed her palm against her stomach, trying to calm herself. Stress wasn't good for the baby, but how could she stay calm when her entire life was crumbling around her? A passport fell from between the pages of another folder. David's face stared back at her, but the name read James Morrison, born Manchester, England. His signature was there, practiced and confident in a handwriting she recognized but had never seen him use. She fumbled through more documents, each one revealing another identity, another lie. Michael Torres from Phoenix, Robert Kim from Seattle. Each identity came with credit cards, driver's licenses, even what appeared to be complete background histories. The craftsmanship was flawless. These weren't amateur fakes. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in plastic, she found a cell phone she'd never seen before. Her hands trembled as she powered it on, surprised when it actually worked. The screen displayed dozens of missed calls and text messages, all from numbers she didn't recognize. The most recent message was from 3 days ago, the day after David's accident. Location compromised. Terminate operation immediately. Await further instructions. Sarah's vision blurred. She gripped the phone tighter, scrolling through older messages. They were brief, coded, filled with references she didn't understand. Meeting locations, timestamps, and cryptic phrases like package delivered and target acquired. Target acquired. The words made her stomach lurch. She opened the phone's photo gallery and immediately wished she hadn't. Images of people she didn't recognize filled the screen. Surveillance photos taken from a distance, some with red X marks drawn across faces. Her husband, the man who brought her coffee in bed every morning and rubbed her feet when they swelled, had taken these photos. The baby kicked again, harder this time. Sarah doubled over, gasping. She needed air, needed to get out of this suffocating room with its horrible secrets. But as she struggled to stand, something else caught her eye. A manila envelope marked emergency protocols in David's handwriting. Inside, she found a letter addressed to her. Sarah, if you're reading this, then I'm dead and you've found my insurance policy. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every lie I told you, every false name I gave to others, every moment I let you believe I was someone I wasn't. You deserved the truth, but the truth would have killed you. Her hands shook so violently she could barely read the next lines. My real name is Marcus Chen. I work for a private military contractor. Worked for them. Past tense, I hope, if you're reading this. I've been trying to get out for 2 years, ever since we got married. They don't like to let people go, especially not people who know what I know. Sarah's throat closed. The cabin suddenly felt impossibly remote, impossibly isolated. If I'm gone, they'll come looking for what I took from them. It's all here, in this room. Evidence of operations they can't afford to have exposed. I kept it as insurance, but now it's yours. There's money in the accounts under the Morrison identity, enough to disappear, to start over somewhere safe. The letter continued, but Sarah couldn't focus on the words. David, Marcus, whoever he was, had brought danger to their door, to her door, to their unborn child's door. A sound from upstairs made her freeze, the distinct creak of the front door opening. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She hadn't heard a car approach. The letter slipped from her fingers as she strained to listen. Footsteps, deliberate and careful, moved across the floor above. Someone was in the cabin. She clicked off the phone's screen and shoved it into her jacket pocket, along with the emergency letter. Her mind raced through possibilities. Maybe it was just a neighbor, someone checking on the property. But the footsteps were too careful, too practiced. These weren't the steps of someone who belonged here. The baby seemed to sense her terror, rolling and pressing against her ribs. Sarah pressed herself against the back wall of the hidden room, praying the entrance was as concealed as it had appeared, praying that whoever was upstairs wouldn't find the loose panel behind the bookshelf. The hidden door swung open with a soft creak that seemed to echo through Sarah's bones. Cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of old paper and something chemical she couldn't identify. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow room that stretched back further than she'd expected. Sarah stepped inside, her pregnant belly brushing against the doorframe. The space was cramped but organized with an almost obsessive precision that made her skin crawl. Metal shelving lined both walls, filled with boxes, files, and equipment she didn't recognize. A small desk sat at the far end, its surface covered with papers weighted down by smooth river stones. Her hands trembled as she approached the nearest shelf. The first box was labeled Matthew's Family, 2019, in David's careful handwriting. She pulled it down, surprised by its weight, and set it on the dusty floor. Inside, she found photographs, dozens of them. The top photo showed a family at what looked like a backyard barbecue. A man with graying hair stood behind a woman with kind eyes, his hands resting on the shoulders of two teenage boys. They were all smiling, unaware they were being photographed. Sarah flipped to the next image, the same family, but this time the woman was alone in her kitchen, visible through a window. Then another, one of the boys walking to school. Sarah's stomach lurched. These weren't family photos, these were surveillance shots. She grabbed another box, this one labeled Surveillance Equipment, Active. Inside, she found small cameras, listening devices, and what appeared to be tracking units. Everything looked professional grade, nothing like the consumer electronics David had claimed to work with. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her rising panic. Sarah pressed a hand to her belly, trying to steady herself as she moved to the desk. The papers scattered across its surface were covered with David's handwriting, but the content made no sense. Lists of names, addresses, phone numbers, financial information, personal details about people she'd never heard of. One sheet caught her attention. At the top, in bold letters, David had written Asset Acquisition, Phase 3. Below it was a detailed timeline spanning 18 months, with entries like established relationship with S. Morrison and marriage proposal, spring 2023, and finally, inheritance transfer complete. Sarah's legs gave out. She sank into the desk chair, staring at her own name written in her dead husband's handwriting, like she was just another target in one of his boxes. The dates matched their relationship perfectly. Their first meeting at the coffee shop, their first date, even their wedding, all of it planned, calculated, documented. She forced herself to keep reading. According to the papers, David had known about her inheritance before they'd ever met. He'd known about the cabin, about her uncle's death, about the money that would come with it. He'd orchestrated their entire relationship. A manila folder marked Sarah Morrison. Personal sat at the bottom of the stack. With shaking hands, she opened it to find copies of her medical records, bank statements, and insurance policies. Photos of her taken from a distance, some dating back to before they'd met. There was even a psychological profile, noting her vulnerability following family deaths and likelihood of rapid attachment. The clinical language made her feel sick. She'd been studied, analyzed, manipulated like a lab rat. Every conversation they'd had, every intimate moment they'd shared, it had all been part of his plan. Sarah's eyes fell on a leather journal tucked behind the desk lamp. The pages were filled with David's observations about their relationship, written like a scientist documenting an experiment. Entry after entry detailed how he'd gained her trust, how he'd shaped their interactions to achieve maximum emotional attachment. He'd noted her grief triggers, her loneliness, her desperate need for connection after losing her parents and uncle in quick succession. On the wall beside the exit hung a map of the surrounding area. Red pins marked various locations, connected by string like a spider's web. Her own house in town was marked with a black pin, and someone had drawn a thick red X over it. Below the map, in David's handwriting, were the words Phase 4, Asset Protection, Eliminate Loose Ends. The flashlight slipped from her numb fingers, clattering to the floor and plunging the room into darkness. The hidden door refused to budge despite Sarah's increasingly frantic efforts. She pressed every inch of the wooden panel, searching for another trigger mechanism, but the wall remained stubbornly solid. After 20 minutes of futile attempts, she finally stepped back, breathing hard and fighting tears of frustration. The rational part of her mind whispered that maybe this was for the best. Maybe some doors were meant to stay closed. But the image of those photographs burned behind her eyelids. Michael's face among strangers, his smile different somehow, colder. She needed answers. Sarah retreated to the main cabin as evening shadows crept across the floor. Her hands shook as she made tea, the familiar ritual offering little comfort. Every creak of the old building made her jump, and she found herself constantly glancing toward the basement door. The pregnancy exhaustion she'd been fighting all day finally overwhelmed her, but sleep brought no peace. She dreamed of Michael, but not the Michael she knew. This version watched her from dark corners, his eyes holding secrets that twisted his beloved features into something unrecognizable. When she reached for him, he dissolved like smoke, leaving only the echo of unfamiliar laughter. Sarah woke with a gasp, her heart hammering against her ribs. Pale morning light filtered through the bedroom windows, and for a moment she almost convinced herself the previous day had been an elaborate nightmare. Then her gaze fell on the muddy footprints she'd tracked upstairs, and reality crashed back. After a quick breakfast she couldn't taste, Sarah drove into Millbrook, the nearest town 20 minutes down the winding mountain road. She needed supplies, and, more importantly, she needed to talk to someone who might have known Michael during his trips to the cabin. Millbrook consisted of little more than a gas station, a general store, and a diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Sarah chose the diner, reasoning that small-town establishments were notorious for gossip and long memories. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair and knowing eyes, approached with coffee before Sarah even settled into a booth. "You must be Michael's wife," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight accent Sarah couldn't place. "I'm Dolores. Sorry for your loss, honey. He was a good man." Sarah's pulse quickened. "You knew him?" "Sure did. He came through here regular-like for, must have been 3 years or so. Always stopped for pie when he was heading up to that cabin." Dolores poured coffee with practiced ease. "Quiet type, but friendly enough. Talked about you all the time." "He did?" The words came out smaller than Sarah intended. "Oh my, yes. Couldn't shut him up about his beautiful wife back in Chicago. Said you were expecting." Dolores's gaze dropped to Sarah's rounded belly. "Congratulations, dear." Sarah forced a smile, but her mind was racing. If Michael had been coming here regularly for 3 years, why had he never mentioned it? He'd always said he was traveling for work, staying in hotels in various cities. Did he ever come here with anyone else?" Sarah asked carefully. Dolores paused in her coffee pouring, and something shifted in her expression. "Why do you ask?" I found some photographs at the cabin, pictures I'd never seen before." The older woman set down the coffee pot and slid into the booth across from Sarah. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Listen, honey, I liked Michael. I really did. But some things ain't my business to tell." Sarah's blood turned cold. "What things?" Dolores glanced around the empty diner, then leaned closer. There was a woman. Came with him sometimes, especially toward the end. Dark hair, city clothes. They weren't affectionate, if you know what I mean. More like business partners. The room seemed to tilt around Sarah. Business partners? That's the feeling I got. She had this way about her, all sharp edges and watching eyes. Made me nervous, to be honest. And Michael, he was different when she was around. Tense, like he was walking on eggshells. Sarah's mouth went dry. "When was the last time you saw them together?" "Maybe 2 months ago?" Michael came through alone after that, but he seemed worried about something. Kept checking his phone, looking over his shoulder. "Last time I saw him was about 3 weeks before—" Dolores trailed off delicately. 3 weeks before he died. Sarah's hands instinctively moved to her belly, protecting the life growing inside her. "This woman," Sarah managed. "What did she look like?" "Tall, probably late 30s. Expensive haircut. She drove a black sedan, one of those luxury models. Never got her name, though." Dolores reached across and squeezed Sarah's hand. "Honey, maybe you should leave well enough alone. Some stones are better left unturned." But it was too late for that advice. Sarah thanked Dolores, left money on the table, and walked back to her car on unsteady legs. The mountain air felt thin, insufficient, as she tried to process what she'd learned. Michael hadn't just hidden the cabin from her. He'd built an entirely separate life here, complete with mysterious business associates and secrets worth killing for. And now, whatever he'd been involved in, she was right in the middle of it. The manila envelope felt heavier than it should have as Sarah carried it to the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly. The discovery of the hidden room had left her reeling, but this envelope, addressed to her in Michael's unmistakable handwriting, felt like a lifeline thrown across an impossible chasm of confusion. She settled into the wooden chair, wincing as the baby kicked against her ribs. Outside, the storm had intensified, rain lashing against the windows with renewed fury. The cabin's isolation, which had once seemed peaceful, now felt ominous. With careful fingers, she broke the seal and withdrew several sheets of paper, along with what appeared to be a birth certificate and a driver's license. Her breath caught as she examined the license first. Michael's photo stared back at her, but the name read David Mitchell, and the address was somewhere in Colorado she'd never heard of. Her hands shook as she unfolded the letter, written in Michael's careful script. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then you've found the room and I'm probably dead. I know how that sounds, like something from a bad movie, but I need you to understand that everything I'm about to tell you is the truth, even though it will seem impossible." Sarah's vision blurred momentarily, and she had to set the letter down to steady herself. The baby moved restlessly, as if sensing her distress. "My real name is David Mitchell, and for the past 8 years, I've been in witness protection. The man you married, the man you fell in love with, is real, but Michael Thompson never existed before I met you. I created him to protect both of us, but mostly to protect you from the life I left behind." The words swam before her eyes. Witness protection. 8 years. Their entire relationship had been built on a foundation of lies, yet even as rage bubbled up inside her, she couldn't deny the authenticity of his voice in these words, the familiar cadence of his thoughts. "I was a forensic accountant in my previous life, working for a firm in Denver. We uncovered something we shouldn't have, a massive money laundering operation tied to the Kozlov family. You probably don't know that name, but they're not people you cross and live to talk about it. My partner, James, tried to warn me, but I was young and stupid and thought I could take them down." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. She'd heard whispers of the Kozlov family in news reports, rumors of Eastern European organized crime that had taken root in major American cities. "James died 3 days after we turned over our evidence to the FBI. Car accident, they said, but I knew better. That's when Agent Morrison approached me about witness protection. I had two choices: disappear forever or end up like James. So I disappeared, and Michael Thompson was born. She thought about all the times Michael had been vague about his past, how he'd always changed the subject when she asked about his childhood or college years. She'd attributed it to painful memories, perhaps family trauma. Never this. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I lied to you every single day for 5 years, but Sarah, I need you to understand. I fell in love with you as myself, not as Michael Thompson, the man who held you when you cried, who dreamed of our future together, who was so excited about the baby. That was all real. That was me, David, not some character I was playing. Tears she hadn't realized were falling spotted the paper. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Sarah placed her hand over her belly protectively. If something has happened to me, it means they found me. I don't know how. I've been so careful, but the Kozlov family has a long memory and longer reach than the FBI ever imagined. The evidence in that room represents 8 years of my own investigation into their operations. I never stopped digging, Sarah. I couldn't let James's death be for nothing. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If Michael was dead and the Kozlovs had found him, then they would have also found evidence of her existence, of their marriage, of the baby. Contact Agent Morrison immediately. His number is in this envelope. Tell him David Mitchell's cover has been blown. He'll know what to do. Don't trust anyone else, not even local police. The Kozlovs have people everywhere. The final paragraph made her stomach lurch. I'm sorry, my love. Sorry for the lies. Sorry for the danger I brought into your life. Sorry that our child will grow up without a father. But I'm not sorry for loving you or for the time we had together. That was the most real thing in my life. Take the evidence, run, trust Morrison, and know that everything I felt for you was true, even if everything else was a lie. It was signed simply David. Sarah sat in the growing darkness, rain hammering the roof, holding the letter that had just destroyed and redefined her entire world. The storm outside had intensified, rattling the cabin windows with a violence that seemed to echo the chaos in Sarah's mind. She sat on the floor of the hidden room, surrounded by the scattered remnants of her husband's secret life, her hands trembling as she held the fake passport bearing David's photograph, but a stranger's name. Marcus Chen. The name felt foreign on her tongue when she whispered it aloud, as if speaking it might somehow make sense of the impossible. But nothing could make sense of this. The man she'd shared a bed with for 3 years, who'd rubbed her feet when they were swollen, who'd talked to their unborn baby every night, that man didn't exist. A sudden thud from somewhere above made her freeze. The sound was too heavy, too deliberate to be wind-blown debris. Sarah's heart hammered as she listened, straining to hear over the storm's fury. Another thud, followed by the unmistakable creak of floorboards. Someone was in the cabin. Moving as quietly as her pregnant body would allow, Sarah reached for the desk lamp and switched it off, plunging the hidden room into darkness. The thin line of light beneath the bookcase seemed to glow like a beacon, and she prayed whoever was upstairs wouldn't notice the slight gap she'd left when entering. Heavy footsteps moved purposefully across the floor above, pausing near what she calculated to be the kitchen area. Sarah pressed her back against the wall, one hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. The baby stirred restlessly, as if sensing her fear. A man's voice, muffled but urgent, spoke words she couldn't quite make out. Then another voice responded. She could tell there were at least 2 of them. Her blood turned to ice as she realized they weren't trying to be quiet. They weren't worried about disturbing anyone, which meant they either thought the cabin was empty or they knew exactly where she was. The footsteps separated, moving in different directions. One set headed toward the bedroom while the other approached the living room and the study where the hidden room's entrance was concealed. Sarah bit her lip to keep from whimpering as the steps grew louder, closer. "Check everything," a gravelly voice commanded. "If she found it, we need to know." Found what? Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. The room itself, The documents? Or something else entirely, something she hadn't discovered yet? A crash from the bedroom suggested they weren't concerned with being gentle. Furniture scraped across the floor, drawers slammed open and shut. They were searching systematically, professionally. These weren't common thieves. The footsteps in the study stopped just outside the bookcase. Sarah held her breath until her lungs burned, afraid even the smallest sound would give her away. Through the thin barrier she could hear someone moving books, testing the shelves. Her legs began to cramp from crouching, but she didn't dare shift position. "Anything?" the gravelly voice called. "Not yet, but look at this." Sarah's heart sank as she heard papers rustling. She'd left David's files scattered on the desk when the storm had distracted her. They'd know someone had been here, reading through everything. "She's been here all right," the second voice confirmed. "Recent, too. These papers are still scattered like someone left in a hurry. Then she's still close. Check the perimeter." She couldn't have gone far in this storm, especially in her condition. They knew about the pregnancy. Sarah's terror crystallized into a cold, sharp focus. These men weren't just searching randomly. They knew exactly who they were looking for. The footsteps moved away from the bookcase, and she heard the front door open, bringing with it the howl of wind and rain. At least one of them had gone outside. But was the other still in the house? She waited, counting her heartbeats, until she was certain she could hear only one person moving around upstairs. This might be her only chance. Sarah felt around in the darkness until her fingers found the document she'd been reading. Whatever David had been involved in, these papers were important enough that men had come looking for them in the middle of a storm. Her hand brushed against something else, a small, hard object that had fallen behind the desk. She picked it up, recognizing by touch the shape of a USB drive. In her shock at discovering the room, she must have missed it. The footsteps above moved toward the kitchen, giving her a moment to act. Sarah pocketed the USB drive and gathered the most important-looking documents, stuffing them inside her jacket. She couldn't take everything, but maybe these would provide answers. The back door slammed, and she heard muffled voices conferring outside. They'd be back soon, and they'd search more thoroughly. Sarah looked around the room one last time, knowing she might never have another chance to uncover the truth. But staying meant death, for her and her baby. She had to choose between answers and survival. She chose survival. The morning light filtered through the cabin's dusty windows as Sarah sat at the kitchen table, Marcus Chen's business card between her trembling fingers. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with fragments of what she'd discovered. The false identity documents, the surveillance photos, the maps, all pointing to a husband she'd never known existed. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "We need to talk. Coffee shop on Pine Street, 10 a.m. Come alone." A friend of David's. Sarah's blood ran cold. How had anyone gotten her number? She'd been so careful, telling no one about the cabin except her sister. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her distress, and she pressed a hand to her belly. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, though nothing felt okay anymore. She considered calling Detective Chen, but something held her back. What if this mysterious contact had answers she desperately needed? What if they could explain the inexplicable? At 9:45, Sarah parked across from the coffee shop, a quaint place she'd never noticed before, despite living in town for 3 years. Through the window, she spotted a woman in her 50s, sitting alone in a corner booth, auburn hair streaked with silver, wearing a navy blazer. The woman's eyes met Sarah's through the glass and nodded slightly. Sarah's heart hammered as she entered. The woman gestured to the seat across from her, and Sarah reluctantly sat down. "You must be Sarah." The woman's voice was gentle but carried an underlying tension. "I'm Linda Morrison. I worked with your husband." "Worked with him?" "David was an accountant at—" "No, honey, he wasn't." Linda's expression was sympathetic but firm. "David worked for the government, specifically the Witness Protection Program. He was a handler." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "That's impossible. We were married for 4 years. I would have known." "Would you?" Linda leaned forward. Think about it. His odd hours, the business trips he couldn't discuss, the way he never talked about his past or family, the careful way he answered questions about his work. Sarah's mind reeled. She'd always attributed David's secretiveness to his reserved personality, his tragic childhood in foster care, but now those puzzle pieces rearranged themselves into a terrifying new picture. The people in those photographs, Sarah said slowly, they weren't. They were his cases, people he was protecting, relocating, keeping safe. Linda's voice dropped to a whisper. Until someone started targeting them, systematically hunting them down. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face, the cabin, that room full of evidence. David was investigating the leak. Someone inside the program was selling information to the highest bidder. Witness locations, new identities, everything. Linda glanced around nervously. He was close to exposing them when he died. His accident wasn't an accident. Linda's words hung in the air like a death sentence. David called me 2 days before he died. Said he'd found something big, something that would blow the whole thing wide open. He was scared, Sarah. I'd never heard him scared before. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her belly. The baby is why you're in danger. David told me about the pregnancy, how happy he was. But he also said if anything happened to him, you'd be targeted, not just because you're his wife, but because of what you might know or find. But I don't know anything. Linda reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. That won't matter to them. They can't take the risk. Sarah thought about the strange car she'd noticed following her yesterday, the feeling of being watched at the grocery store, the way her neighbor had looked at her strangely when she'd mentioned going to the cabin. What am I supposed to do? I can't run. I'm 6 months pregnant, and I have a life here. You have to disappear, Sarah. Tonight. I can help you, but you have to trust me. Sarah studied Linda's face, searching for deception, but finding only genuine concern. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know you're not part of this conspiracy? Linda pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a photo, David standing beside her and several other people in what looked like a government office. He was wearing a badge and looked serious, professional, nothing like the gentle accountant Sarah had married. This was taken 6 months before he met you, Linda said. He was one of our best, dedicated, thorough, and ethical to a fault. That's what made him dangerous to whoever's behind this. Sarah stared at the photo, her world tilting further off its axis. The man in the image was undeniably David, yet completely foreign to her. Even his posture was different, more alert, more guarded. If I run, Sarah said finally, what kind of life will my child have? Always looking over our shoulders, never staying in one place? A life, Linda replied simply, which is more than you'll have if you stay. Outside, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. The cell phone in Sarah's trembling hand buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. Her finger hovered over the decline button, but something made her answer. Hello, Sarah. The voice was smooth, cultured, with just the hint of an accent she couldn't place. I believe you've found something that belongs to me. Her blood turned to ice. Who is this? Someone who knew your husband very well, better than you did, it seems. A low chuckle that made her skin crawl. You've been busy, haven't you? Exploring places you shouldn't, touching things that weren't meant for your eyes. Sarah's gaze darted to the hidden room, its door still hanging open like a wound in the wall. I don't know what you're talking about. The passport you found. David Chen. That name means nothing to you, does it? But it should. That was your husband's real name before he became the man you fell in love with. The room seemed to tilt around her. She gripped the edge of the kitchen table, fighting waves of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. You're lying. Check the birthmark, Sarah. Behind his left ear, shaped like a crescent moon. I'm betting that detail never made it into his fabricated history. Her knees nearly buckled. The birthmark was real. She'd traced it countless times with her fingertip during quiet moments together. How could this stranger know such an intimate detail? "What do you want?" she whispered. "What David stole from me. He thought he could disappear, start fresh with his pretty American wife. But debts don't disappear, Sarah. They compound with interest. He's dead. Whatever he owed you, death doesn't settle this particular debt. But you can." Through the kitchen window, Sarah caught a glimpse of movement in the tree line. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Are you watching me?" "You have something I need, the safety deposit box key." David was clever, but not clever enough. He left breadcrumbs, didn't he? Hidden where only someone who truly knew him would think to look. Sarah's mind raced back to the hidden room, to the photographs and documents scattered across that makeshift desk. She hadn't found any key, but then again, she'd barely scratched the surface before fear had driven her away. "I don't have any key." "Then you'd better find it. You have 24 hours, Sarah. After that, I'll have to take more direct action, and I'd hate for anything to happen to you or that baby you're carrying." The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, her hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped it. 24 hours. The stranger knew about her pregnancy, knew about the hidden room, knew details about Michael, David, that only someone very close to him could know. She forced herself to return to the secret room, this time moving with desperate purpose. The photographs took on new meaning now. In one, she could see Michael, David, standing beside a sleek black car, his arm around a woman Sarah didn't recognize. His smile looked different somehow, harder around the edges. Another photo showed him in what appeared to be an expensive restaurant, shaking hands with a man whose face had been deliberately obscured. The financial documents were more troubling. Bank statements from accounts she'd never heard of, showing deposits and withdrawals in amounts that made her dizzy. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. A life of money and secrecy that ran parallel to the modest existence they'd shared. But it was the notebook she found wedged behind one of the filing cabinets that made everything click into place. Pages of Michael's handwriting, detailing meetings, transactions, and what appeared to be some kind of elaborate con involving art forgeries and wealthy collectors. The final entry was dated just 2 weeks before his death. Victor getting suspicious. May need to accelerate timeline. Sarah doesn't suspect anything. Pregnancy has her distracted. Safety net in place. If something happens to me, the key is where we first said goodbye. Sarah read the passage 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. The clinical way he'd written about her, about their unborn child, as if they were merely pieces on a chessboard. But it was the last line that gave her hope and terror. The key was where they'd first said goodbye. Their first fight as a married couple had been stupid, over something trivial she could barely remember now, but she remembered where it had happened, the old oak tree by the lake, the one with their initials carved into the bark. Michael had stormed off, and she'd waited there for hours until he came back to apologize. Darkness was falling as Sarah grabbed a flashlight and headed for the door. Behind her, the hidden room gaped open like a mouthful of secrets. She didn't bother closing it. Whatever happened next, there would be no more hiding from the truth. The flashlight beam cut through the gathering dusk as she made her way toward the lake, toward answers that might save her life or destroy what little remained of her world. The drive back to the cabin felt like a fever dream. Sarah's hands trembled on the steering wheel as Detective Morrison's words echoed in her mind. "Marcus Webb disappeared 3 months before you met your husband." The photograph of the real Marcus Webb burned in her memory, a stranger's face, younger, softer, nothing like the man she'd married and loved. She pulled into the gravel driveway as dusk painted the sky in violent shades of orange and red. The cabin loomed before her, no longer the romantic retreat she'd imagined, but a monument to deception. Every board, every nail, every carefully chosen piece of furniture had been selected by a man whose real name she didn't even know. Inside, she went straight to the hidden room. The false wall stood open like a wound, revealing the secrets that had destroyed her world. But now she looked at everything with different eyes. If her husband wasn't Marcus Webb, then who was he? And what had happened to the real Marcus? She pulled down box after box, spreading their contents across the main room's floor. Bank statements, surveillance photos, fake identification documents. It was overwhelming, but somewhere in this maze of lies lay the truth about the man she'd married. A manila envelope tucked behind the others caught her attention. Her name was written across it in her husband's familiar handwriting, "For Sarah, if something happens to me." Her heart hammered as she tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small silver key. "Sarah, if you're reading this, then they found me. I never wanted you to know about my past, but you deserve the truth. My real name is David Chen. I worked for people who don't forgive mistakes, and I made a very big one. Marcus Webb was my handler, my friend, and I got him killed. I took his identity to hide from them, to start over, to become someone worthy of you." The key opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank in Millfield, box 247. Inside you'll find everything you need to disappear. Money, new identities for you and the baby, contacts who can help. Use them. These people won't stop until they find what Marcus hid, and they'll kill you to get it. I love you more than you'll ever know. I'm sorry for the lies. Take our child and run. David. Sarah's vision blurred as tears fell onto the paper. David. His real name was David, and he'd been running from something so terrible he'd stolen a dead man's life. The baby kicked forcefully, as if sensing her distress, and she pressed her hand to her belly. "What did your daddy get us into?" she whispered. A soft creak from the front porch made her freeze. The cabin settled at night, but this sound was different, deliberate, careful. She quickly gathered the letter and key, shoving them into her pocket as she moved to the window. A black sedan sat at the end of her driveway, its engine ticking as it cooled. Her blood turned to ice. Detective Morrison had warned her that dangerous people might come looking for whatever Marcus or David had hidden. Another creak, closer to the door now. Sarah's mind raced through her options. The back door led to dense woods, but in her condition, she couldn't outrun anyone. Her phone showed no signal. The cabin's isolation, once romantic, now felt like a trap. She grabbed a kitchen knife and moved toward the bedroom, but the front door's lock was already turning. Someone had a key. "Mrs. Webb?" a man's voice called softly. "We just want to talk." Sarah pressed herself against the bedroom wall, hardly daring to breathe. Through the crack in the door, she could see two figures moving through her living room, one tall and thin, the other shorter but powerfully built. They moved with the practiced efficiency of professionals. "Check the back room," the tall one said. "It has to be here somewhere." They were looking for whatever Marcus Webb had hidden, the thing David had died for. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her pocket where the safety deposit box key lay hidden. Did they know about it? Had David managed to keep that secret? The shorter man emerged from the hidden room, shaking his head. "Nothing. Just the surveillance stuff we already knew about. Then search everything else. Turn this place upside down if you have to." Sarah heard them moving through the cabin systematically. Drawers sliding open, furniture being moved, floorboards being tested. They were thorough, patient, the kind of people who wouldn't give up easily. The baby shifted inside her, and Sarah bit back a gasp as a sharp pain shot through her side. The stress was affecting her more than she'd realized. She needed to get out, needed to reach that safety deposit box and follow David's final instructions. But first, she had to survive the next few minutes. Footsteps approached the bedroom door, and Sarah raised the knife with shaking hands, knowing it would be useless against trained killers, but unable to surrender without a fight. Her child's life depended on what happened next. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie stillness that seemed to press against the cabin walls. Sarah sat hunched over Marcus's laptop, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through encrypted files she'd finally managed to access using passwords hidden in his journal. Each document she opened felt like another nail in the coffin of her marriage. Bank statements showed transfers totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars to offshore accounts. Travel records revealed trips she'd never known about. trips that coincided with dates when Marcus had supposedly been at conferences. But it was the folder labeled contingency that made her blood run cold. Inside were detailed profiles of 3 women, complete with photographs, addresses, employment histories, and personal habits. The first photo showed a brunette named Lisa Chen, marked with a red X and the date from 2 years ago. The second featured a blonde called Amanda Reeves, also marked with an X, dated 8 months ago. The third photo made Sarah's heart stop entirely. It was her own engagement photo, smiling radiantly at Marcus outside their favorite restaurant. But unlike the others, her file was marked active, phase 3 complete. Below her photo were meticulous notes about her routines, her friends, her family's financial status, and most chilling of all, a timeline that ended with inheritance accessible upon subject's death, staged accident preferred. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her terror. Sarah pressed her hand to her stomach, fighting waves of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Marcus hadn't fallen in love with her by chance. Their entire relationship had been orchestrated, every shared moment calculated, every tender word part of an elaborate con. But why was she still alive? According to his timeline, the accident should have happened months ago. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Check the news." With shaking hands, Sarah pulled up a local news website. The headline made her gasp. "Missing women found dead. Police suspect serial killer." The article featured photos of Lisa Chen and Amanda Reeves alongside 3 other women Sarah didn't recognize. All had been found buried in remote locations across the state. All had been wealthy widows or divorcees. All had died in what initially appeared to be accidents before forensic evidence revealed murder. Sarah's vision blurred as the implications crashed over her. Marcus wasn't just a con artist, he was a killer, and she was supposed to be his next victim. Another text arrived. "We need to meet. Cemetery at Miller's Road, 1 hour. Come alone. Your life depends on it." Every instinct screamed at her to call the police, but doubt crept in. If Marcus had been this careful, this methodical, did he have connections in law enforcement too? The fake detective's visit suggested his network ran deeper than she'd imagined. Sarah grabbed the pistol she'd found in Marcus's desk, checking that it was loaded before tucking it into her jacket. She copied the laptop files to a flash drive, then hid the drive inside a coffee can in the kitchen pantry. If something happened to her, maybe someone would eventually find the evidence. The drive to Miller's Road Cemetery took 20 minutes through winding mountain roads. Sarah kept checking her rearview mirror, paranoid that every set of headlights belonged to someone hunting her. The cemetery gates stood open, rusted iron twisted into decorative scrollwork that looked ominous in the fading daylight. She parked near the entrance but left the engine running. Among the weathered headstones, a figure emerged from behind a large marble monument, a woman in her 40s with short auburn hair and tired eyes. "You're Sarah," the woman said as she approached. It wasn't a question. "Who are you?" "Detective Rachel Morris, formerly with Seattle PD." She showed Sarah a badge before tucking it away. "I've been tracking your husband for 3 years." "Tracking Marcus?" "But the police said..." "The police don't know about me. I'm off the books on this one." Morris glanced around nervously. "Your husband killed my sister. Lisa Chen was my half-sister, and when local cops ruled her death an accident, I started digging. That's when I discovered the pattern." Sarah felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. "So you sent the text?" "I've been watching the cabin, waiting for the right moment. When I saw you'd survived longer than his usual timeline, I knew something had changed his plan." Morris stepped closer, her voice urgent. "You're in immediate danger, Sarah. He's not dead." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "What do you mean he's not dead?" "Marcus Holloway, if that's even his real name, staged his own death. The body was too badly burned for DNA confirmation, and I have reason to believe he bribed someone in the coroner's office. He's done this before, created new identities after completing his operations." Sarah's legs nearly gave out. "Then why hasn't he killed me?" Morris's expression grew grim. "Because you're pregnant. I think he's waiting for the baby." The photograph trembled in Sarah's hands as she stared at the impossible image. David, unmistakably David, standing beside a woman with striking auburn hair and 2 young children. They looked like a family, a happy family. The timestamp in the corner read 3 years ago, just months after she and David had started dating. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto the cold concrete floor of the hidden room. The manila envelope had contained dozens of similar photos, along with bank statements, property deeds, and what appeared to be a second driver's license bearing David's face but a different name entirely, Marcus Chen. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her distress. Sarah pressed her free hand to her belly, trying to steady her breathing. Everything she thought she knew about her husband was crumbling around her like ancient paper. A sound from upstairs made her freeze. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps moving across the cabin's main floor. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She'd locked all the doors. The car was hidden behind the cabin. Whoever was up there had either picked the locks or had their own key. She quickly but quietly gathered the scattered photographs and documents, shoving them back into the envelope. The footsteps paused directly above her, and she heard the distinctive creak of the floorboard near the kitchen sink. Someone was searching the cabin systematically. Moving as silently as possible, Sarah made her way to the hidden room's entrance. The bookshelf door was still slightly ajar, and through the gap she could see a sliver of the basement. She held her breath and listened. "I know you're here, Sarah." The voice was unfamiliar, male with a slight accent she couldn't place. "David told us about you, about the baby. We just want to talk." The lie in his tone was unmistakable. Sarah's grip tightened on the envelope. Whatever David had been involved in, these people weren't here for a friendly conversation. "Your husband took something that belongs to our organization," the voice continued, closer now. She could hear him descending the basement stairs. "We believe he may have hidden it here. We're hoping you can help us locate it." Sarah's eyes darted around the hidden room. Besides the filing cabinets and the safe she'd already opened, there were several boxes stacked against the far wall. She hadn't had time to examine them yet, but whatever these people were looking for might be among David's hidden possessions. The basement floor creaked as the intruder moved around. Sarah pressed herself against the wall behind the door, praying the bookshelf's mechanism wouldn't give away her location. The baby seemed to sense the danger and had gone still. "Mrs. Chen," the man called out, using the name from David's fake ID. "Or do you prefer Mrs. Morrison? Your husband used so many names, it's hard to keep track." The casual mention of multiple identities sent another wave of nausea through Sarah. How could she have lived with someone for 3 years and known nothing about who he really was? Light suddenly spilled through the gap in the doorway. The man had found the basement's main light switch. Sarah could see his shadow moving methodically around the room, checking behind the furnace, examining the walls. He was looking for the hidden room. Sarah quietly opened the nearest box, hoping to find whatever they were after. Inside were more documents, these bearing official government seals. As she rifled through them, certain words jumped out at her: classified, asset, termination authorized. Her blood chilled as she realized David hadn't just been living a double life. He'd been some kind of spy or intelligence operative. "The architectural plans we obtained show some interesting discrepancies in this basement's dimensions," the man continued, his voice now uncomfortably close to the bookshelf. "Old houses often have hidden spaces. Prohibition-era hiding spots, perhaps." Sarah's heart hammered as she heard him tapping on the walls, methodically working his way around the basement's perimeter. It was only a matter of time before he discovered the entrance. At the bottom of the box, her fingers closed around something metallic. She pulled out a small device that looked like a sophisticated USB drive, but with additional ports and what appeared to be encryption hardware. This had to be what they were after. The tapping stopped directly on the other side of the bookshelf. "Interesting," the man murmured. "This section sounds hollow." Sarah's mind raced. The window near the ceiling was too small and high for her to escape through, especially in her condition. The only way out was through the basement, which meant getting past the intruder. She heard the man testing the bookshelf, pushing and pulling at the edges. The mechanism was well hidden, but he seemed to know what he was looking for. The device in her hand felt warm, almost alive. Whatever information it contained had cost David his life and was now threatening hers. But it might also be her only bargaining chip. The bookshelf began to move. The rain hammered against the cabin windows as Sarah crouched behind the kitchen counter, her phone clutched in her trembling hands. Detective Morrison's number glowed on the screen, but her thumb hovered over the call button, paralyzed by indecision. Every shadow seemed to move in her peripheral vision. Every creak of the old wood made her heart race faster. She had maybe 10 minutes before whoever was circling the property made their move. The figure she'd glimpsed through the trees had disappeared, but she could feel eyes watching her, calculating. The evidence scattered across the hidden room upstairs felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Michael's other life, the murders, the photographs of women who looked disturbingly like her. A soft thud from the back porch made her breath catch. Then another. Footsteps, deliberate and careful. Sarah's mind raced through her options. The front door was closer, but it would put her in full view of whoever was approaching from behind the cabin. The basement entrance was too far, and she'd be trapped down there. Her only chance was to stay hidden and hope they passed by. The baby kicked sharply, as if sensing her terror. Sarah pressed her free hand to her belly, trying to calm both herself and the child growing inside her. She thought of the ultrasound photo tucked in her wallet, the tiny face that would never know its father, or would only know the monster he'd really been. Glass shattered in the living room. Sarah bit back a scream as footsteps crossed the wooden floor above her hiding spot. They moved with purpose, not the cautious steps of someone breaking in, but the confident stride of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Someone who had been here before. Sarah. The voice was male, calm, almost gentle. "I know you're here. Your car's outside." She didn't recognize the voice, but something about its tone made her skin crawl. There was a familiarity in it, like he knew her intimately. Had Michael told this person about her? Were they partners in whatever twisted game he'd been playing? "I'm not here to hurt you," the voice continued, closer now. The footsteps had moved into the kitchen. "Michael spoke about you often. He was very fond of you." Sarah's stomach lurched, past tense, as if Michael's death hadn't been the accident everyone believed it was. "He made some poor choices toward the end," the man continued, his voice now directly above her hiding spot. "Got sloppy, started keeping too much evidence." "But you already found that, didn't you?" A chair scraped across the floor. He was sitting down, making himself comfortable. The casual nature of it terrified her more than if he'd been shouting threats. "The problem is, Sarah, you've seen things you shouldn't have. And Detective Morrison, well, he's asking the right questions now, isn't he? All because you couldn't leave well enough alone." Her phone buzzed with a text message, the sound sharp in the silence. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she read the preview. Morrison found dead in his car. "Stop running." The man above her chuckled softly. "Ah, you got the news. Unfortunate, really. He was a good cop, but he was getting too close to the truth." Sarah's mind reeled. Morrison was dead. The only person who might have believed her story, who might have protected her, was gone. She was truly alone now, trapped in this nightmare that had once been her sanctuary. "Now I need you to come out, Sarah. We have things to discuss." The voice had hardened, lost its false gentleness. "There are loose ends to tie up, and you're holding several of them." She thought about running, but her pregnant body felt clumsy and slow. The baby had grown so much in recent weeks, making quick movement difficult. And where would she run to? The nearest neighbor was miles away, and he clearly had help, people who could track her down no matter where she went. "I'm going to count to 10, the man said. "If you don't come out, things are going to get very unpleasant, and we don't want to stress the baby, do we?" The casual mention of her pregnancy sent fresh terror coursing through her veins. He knew about the baby, had probably known about it before she'd even told Michael. How long had they been watching her? planning this? 1. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to think. There had to be something she was missing, some advantage she could find. 2. The gun. Morrison had mentioned finding a gun in Michael's things. Had the police taken everything, or was there still something hidden in the cabin she could use? 3. Her hand moved instinctively to the kitchen drawer nearest to her. Michael had always kept a spare key to his truck there, along with other odds and ends. Her fingers closed around cold metal, not a gun, but a heavy wrench he'd used for repairs. 4. It wasn't much, but it was something. Sarah gripped the wrench tightly and prepared to fight for her life. The safe house felt like a tomb. Sarah sat on the edge of the narrow bed, staring at the burner phone agent Martinez had left with her. 3 days had passed since David's arrest. 3 days of waiting in this sterile room with its beige walls and single barred window. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her anxiety. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Martinez entered with a manila folder and 2 cups of coffee, his expression grim. "We need to talk," he said, settling into the plastic chair across from her. The forensics team finished processing the cabin. Sarah's stomach clenched. "And we found more than we expected." He opened the folder, revealing photographs that made her breath catch. The hidden room she discovered looked different now, stripped bare under harsh fluorescent lighting. There were false walls. Your husband had compartments within compartments. The first photograph showed stacks of cash, more money than Sarah had ever seen. The second revealed passports, at least a dozen, each bearing Michael's face but different names. The third made her hands shake, surveillance photos of her, taken from a distance over what appeared to be months. "He was watching me before we met," she whispered. Martinez nodded gravely. "Sarah, your meeting wasn't random. The coffee shop, the spilled drink, the charming apology, it was all orchestrated. He'd been studying you for at least 6 months." The room spun. Sarah gripped the edge of the bed, fighting nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. "Why me? I'm nobody special. I was just a teacher living alone." "That's exactly why." Martinez pulled out another document. "Your background made you perfect. No close family after your parents died. Few deep friendships, a quiet life. You were isolated enough to disappear without many people asking questions, but stable enough to provide the perfect cover. Disappear?" The word came out strangled. "We found plane tickets, Sarah. 2 tickets to Romania, dated for next week. And there's more." He hesitated, then showed her a medical file. "We found research about inducing early labor, about newborn care, about changing birth records." The truth hit her like a physical blow. The baby. He wanted the baby. "We think so." A child would make the new identity even more convincing. A loving father and his newborn, tragic widower whose wife died in childbirth. It would have been an unassailable cover story. Sarah's vision blurred. Every tender moment, every gentle touch on her growing belly, every whispered promise about their future together. All of it had been calculated manipulation. The man she'd loved had been planning to murder her and steal their child. "Where is he now?" she managed. "Federal holding facility. But Sarah, there's something else." Martinez's voice dropped. "David isn't talking, but his associates are still out there. We intercepted communications suggesting they know about the baby, about you. They consider you a liability." Fear shot through her like electricity. "What kind of communications?" "Someone named Victor has been asking questions, making inquiries about safe houses, about witness protection protocols." Martinez leaned forward. "We think they're planning to eliminate you before you can testify." The baby kicked hard, and Sarah pressed both hands to her belly protectively. "Can't you arrest them?" "We don't know who they all are yet. David's organization is bigger than we initially thought. International. We're talking about people with resources, people who can reach anywhere." He paused. "Sarah, we want to move you into formal witness protection. Tonight." "What does that mean?" "New identity, new location, new life. Complete break from everything you've known. It's the only way to guarantee your safety and the baby's safety." Sarah stared at the photographs scattered between them, evidence of the elaborate lie her life had become. The man she'd married, the father of her child, had never existed. Michael Reeves was just another mask worn by David Chen, and she was beginning to understand that David might not even be his real name either. "How long?" she asked quietly. "How long would I have to live like that?" Martinez's silence stretched too long, potentially forever. These people don't forget, and they don't forgive. Once you're in the program, coming back to your old life isn't really an option. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision crushing down on her. Stay and risk her life, and her child's life, or disappear forever into a world of assumed names and constant vigilance. Either way, Sarah Reeves was gone. The woman who had laughed over coffee with a charming stranger, who had believed in love at first sight, who had planned a future in a remote cabin, that woman was as dead as the marriage she'd thought was real. When she opened her eyes, Martinez was watching her with something that might have been sympathy. "I need to think," she said. "You have until midnight. After that, the decision gets made for you." The safe house felt like a tomb. Sarah pressed her face against the bulletproof glass, watching Agent Martinez coordinate with the tactical team outside. 3 days had passed since Detective Chen's arrest, but instead of relief, she felt only a deeper, more suffocating dread. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Don't answer it," Martinez said sharply, but Sarah was already swiping to accept. "Hello, Sarah." The voice was electronically distorted, mechanical. "You've been very busy." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Martinez lunged for the phone, but she pulled back. "Who is this?" "Someone who knew your husband very well. Someone who's been watching you uncover all his little secrets. Chen is in custody. It's over." A laugh, like grinding metal. Detective Chen was just following orders. "Did you really think one corrupt cop was behind everything? Your husband stole something very valuable from very dangerous people, Sarah. And now that debt falls to you." Martinez was frantically signaling to the tech team monitoring the call. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the phone. "I don't know what you're talking about. I found the evidence. I turned it over to the FBI. Evidence can be replicated. What we want is irreplaceable. Your husband hid something else in that cabin, something worth $50 million. You have 72 hours to find it. I searched every inch of that place. There's nothing else. Then you didn't search hard enough. 72 hours, Sarah, or your baby will never take its first breath." The line went dead. Sarah doubled over, gasping as a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. Martinez caught her arm, guiding her to a chair. "We're increasing security," he said grimly. "And we're going back to the cabin." "No." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. It's more dangerous to ignore this threat. Whoever that was, they're not bluffing. And they're right about one thing. If Michael hid something worth that much money, we need to find it before they do." 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in an armored SUV heading back toward the mountains. The tactical team had swept the area twice, but the cabin felt different now, malevolent in the fading daylight. Every shadow could hide a sniper. Every rustling tree branch could mask approaching footsteps. Inside, the hidden room looked exactly as she'd left it, but Sarah forced herself to see it with fresh eyes. The voice on the phone was right. She'd been so focused on the identities and documents that she might have missed something else entirely. "What would be worth 50 million? Martinez asked, systematically checking every floorboard. Sarah ran her hands along the walls, searching for hidden compartments. "Diamonds, gold, bearer bonds, or information," suggested Agent Williams, the tech specialist. "Corporate secrets, government intelligence, blackmail material." They worked in methodical silence, dismantling Michael's carefully constructed shrine to deception. Sarah pulled books from shelves, checking for hollow spines. Martinez used a metal detector on the walls and floor. Williams examined every electronic device with sophisticated scanning equipment. Nothing. As darkness fell, Sarah slumped against the wall, exhausted. The baby was restless, pressing against her ribs as if sensing her distress. She closed her eyes, trying to think like Michael. Where would he hide something so valuable that people would kill for it? The photographs, she said suddenly. Martinez looked up from where he was examining the floorboards. What about them? Sarah struggled to her feet, moving to the wall of surveillance photos. He was obsessed with documenting everything. What if it's not about what's hidden in the room, but what's hidden in plain sight? She began pulling down photographs, examining them carefully. Most showed her daily routine, but others captured people she didn't recognize meeting in parking garages, exchanging briefcases, entering nondescript buildings. Williams joined her, using a magnifying glass to examine the images. These aren't just surveillance photos. They're documentation of criminal activities. Your husband was building a case, or an insurance policy, Martinez added grimly. Sarah found it in the 47th photograph, an image of two men shaking hands outside a chemical plant. On the back, in Michael's precise handwriting, Riverside Chemical, illegal dumping coordinates, 41.2033 degree N, 80.854, 5 degree W, documented evidence in RCB Safety Deposit Box 247. Riverside Chemical, Williams breathed. They've been fighting a class action lawsuit for years, 50 million in damages. Martinez was already on his radio, coordinating with the FBI field office. But Sarah barely heard him. A new sound had joined the mountain wind outside, the low rumble of approaching vehicles. They're here, she whispered. The lights went out, plunging them into darkness. Through the windows, Sarah could see moving shadows surrounding the cabin. Red laser dots danced across the walls. Martinez grabbed her hand. Back exit, now! But as they reached the rear door, it exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. The warehouse felt like a tomb when Sarah stepped inside, her breath visible in the frigid air. Dust motes danced in the pale morning light that filtered through grimy windows, and somewhere in the darkness beyond, she could hear the steady drip of water hitting concrete. Marcus had chosen this place well, isolated, forgotten, perfect for whatever twisted finale he had planned. She moved carefully between towering shelves of abandoned inventory, her hand instinctively protecting her belly. The baby had been restless all night, as if sensing the danger that lay ahead. Every shadow could hide a threat, every sound could signal Marcus's presence. The weight of the gun in her jacket pocket provided little comfort against the fear crawling up her spine. You came alone, Marcus's voice echoed from somewhere above. Sarah looked up to see him standing on a metal catwalk, looking down at her like a predator studying prey. I wasn't sure you would. I keep my promises, she called back, her voice steadier than she felt. Unlike some people. His laugh was cold and humorless. David always said you were too trusting. It was one of the things that made you such a perfect mark. The words hit her like physical blows. Even now, even knowing everything she knew, hearing David's name used as a weapon against her made her chest tight with grief and rage. He loved me. He used you. Marcus began descending a rusty staircase, his footsteps clanging against metal. We all did. You were our insurance policy, Sarah, our way back to a normal life if things went south. David just got a little too comfortable playing house. Sarah's hand found the gun, her fingers closing around the grip. The photos I found were David's insurance against me. Marcus reached the ground floor, staying just out of reach in the shadows between two shelves. He was planning to disappear with you and the baby, start fresh somewhere new. Cut me out completely after everything we'd been through together. So you killed him. I eliminated a threat to our operation. His voice held no remorse, no hint of the friendship he and David had supposedly shared. David forgot that loyalty goes both ways. He forgot what we'd built together. Sarah took a step back as he moved closer, her pulse hammering in her throat. What you built was a lie. People died because of what you did. People die every day. Marcus emerged from the shadows, and Sarah could see the cold calculation in his eyes. The difference is that some deaths serve a purpose. David's death protected years of work, millions of dollars in assets. Your death will do the same. The authorities know where I am. The lie came easily, born of desperation. If something happens to me, Detective Rodriguez is currently following a false lead I planted about you fleeing to Canada." Marcus smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Sarah had ever seen. Amazing how easy it is to manipulate people when you know their weaknesses. She wants to believe you're innocent, so she's chasing shadows while you disappear forever. The trap closed around her with mathematical precision, every exit blocked, every ally misdirected. Sarah realized she was looking at a master manipulator who had orchestrated events from the very beginning. Even her discovery of the hidden room might have been part of his plan. "You led me to the evidence," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. "You wanted me to find it. I needed you angry enough to run, desperate enough to make mistakes." Marcus pulled out his own gun, a sleek black pistol that looked military-grade. "But I also needed to tie up loose ends. David kept records he shouldn't have, insurance policies he thought would protect him. With you gone, those loose ends die with you." Sarah's mind raced, searching for options that didn't exist. The warehouse stretched endlessly in all directions, full of hiding places but no real escape routes. Marcus stood between her and the main entrance, and she had no idea what other exits might exist in the maze of shelves and shadows. "The baby is innocent," she said, playing for time. "Whatever David did, whatever you think I know, the baby has nothing to do with it. The baby is David's child, David's legacy." Marcus raised the gun, his hand steady and sure. "I won't leave any loose ends." In that moment, Sarah understood that talking wouldn't save her. Pleading wouldn't save her. Marcus had moved beyond reason into something cold and final. She thought of David, of the man she had loved and lost twice over. She thought of their child, innocent and trusting, depending on her to survive. The gun in her pocket felt impossibly heavy as she slowly reached for it, knowing she had perhaps seconds before Marcus decided the conversation was over. The warehouse around them felt like the edge of the world, a place where normal rules no longer applied. One way or another, this would end here. The cabin erupted in chaos as Marcus's men poured through the shattered front door. Sarah pressed herself against the cold earth wall of the root cellar, her heart hammering so violently she was certain they could hear it above. The baby kicked frantically, as if sensing the mortal danger surrounding them. Heavy boots thundered overhead, accompanied by the crash of furniture being overturned and glass breaking. Voices shouted orders, growing closer to the kitchen where the cellar entrance lay hidden beneath the loose floorboard. "She's here somewhere," Marcus's voice carried down through the cabin. "The car's still warm. Check every inch of this place." Sarah's hand found the USB drive in her pocket, the one containing all of David's evidence about Marcus's operations. The real David, she reminded herself. Her husband had been Detective David Chen, working undercover for 2 years to bring down Marcus's human trafficking network. Everything she'd discovered in the hidden room painted a picture of a man she'd never truly known, yet somehow loved even more deeply. The footsteps moved away from the kitchen, and Sarah heard doors slamming throughout the cabin. She had to move. The cellar was a dead end, and it would only be a matter of time before they found the entrance. Her phone showed no signal, but she remembered David's notes mentioning an emergency radio in the old hunting blind, half a mile into the woods. The cabin fell silent for a moment, and Sarah seized her chance. She pushed open the cellar door just enough to peer into the kitchen, empty. Moving as quietly as her 8-month pregnant body would allow, she crept toward the back door. Each step felt like walking on broken glass, every creak of the floorboards threatening to give her away. She reached for the door handle just as footsteps echoed from the hallway behind her. "Kitchen's clear," a voice called out. "But boss, you need to see this." Sarah's blood turned to ice. They'd found the hidden room. She slipped outside into the frigid night air, leaving the door slightly ajar to avoid the sound of it closing. The woods loomed before her like a black wall, but she'd studied David's maps obsessively. The hunting blind was northwest, following the old deer trail that started behind the woodshed. Behind her, Marcus's voice exploded in rage. "Find her! She has everything, the files, the recordings, all of it. She cannot leave these woods alive." Sarah stumbled into the tree line just as flashlight beams began sweeping the yard. Branches caught at her clothes and scratched her face, but she pushed deeper into the darkness. The baby's movements had become erratic, painful, and she realized with growing terror that the stress was triggering contractions. "Not now," she pleaded silently. "Please, not now." The sounds of pursuit grew louder behind her. Dogs. They'd brought tracking dogs. Her scent would be easy to follow, especially with her body producing the distinctive hormones of late pregnancy. She needed to reach the creek David had marked on his maps. Running water would confuse the trail. A powerful flashlight beam swept across the trees 20 yards to her left. Sarah dropped behind a fallen log, pressing her face to the damp earth and trying to control her ragged breathing. The contractions were coming regularly now, each one stealing her breath and threatening to make her cry out. "She's pregnant and scared," Marcus called to his men. "She can't have gone far. Spread out and work your way toward the road. She'll try to reach the highway." But Sarah wasn't heading for the road. David's notes had been clear about the hunting blind's location, and more importantly, about the weapons cache hidden there. Her husband had been preparing for this day, knowing that eventually his cover would be blown and Marcus would come for him. He just hadn't lived long enough to use his contingency plan. The creek appeared ahead, a ribbon of silver in the moonlight. Sarah waded in, gasping as the icy water soaked through her boots and numbed her feet. She followed the stream bed for 50 yards before climbing out on the far bank, hoping the dogs would lose her scent. Another contraction hit, this one so powerful it drove her to her knees. She bit down on her sleeve to muffle her cry, tasting blood where her teeth cut her lip. The baby was coming, whether she was ready or not. Through the trees ahead, she could make out the dark shape of the hunting blind. Almost there. Just a few more minutes and she'd have access to David's emergency radio, his weapons, and most importantly, his final insurance policy. The dead man's switch that would automatically transmit all evidence to the FBI if he failed to check in. Sarah hauled herself to her feet and stumbled forward, one hand pressed to her belly as another contraction built. Behind her, the baying of the dogs grew closer. She was going to have to fight for 2 lives tonight. The sirens had faded hours ago, but Sarah could still hear them echoing in her mind. As she sat in the hospital room, one hand resting protectively on her belly. Detective Morrison had finally left after taking her statement, promising that Marcus Chen's body would be processed quickly and the threat officially eliminated. But the weight of everything she'd discovered still pressed down on her like a physical force. Dr. Patel entered quietly, clipboard in hand. "The baby's heartbeat is strong," she said with a gentle smile. "No signs of distress despite what you've been through. You're both going to be fine." Sarah nodded, though fine felt like a foreign concept. "When can I go home?" "Tomorrow morning, if you continue to show no complications." Dr. Patel paused at the door. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay? The police mentioned you might not want to return to the cabin immediately." The cabin. Sarah's throat tightened. She'd inherited what she thought was a sanctuary, only to discover it was built on a foundation of lies and blood. "My sister's coming to get me. I'll stay with her for a while." After the doctor left, Sarah stared out the window at the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, teams were still processing the cabin, cataloguing evidence from the hidden room, unraveling the web of David's, Michael's, double life. The man she'd mourned, the father of her child, had been a ghost constructed from stolen identities and careful deceptions. Her phone buzzed. A text from Detective Morrison, additional evidence recovered. "We'll brief you tomorrow. Rest tonight." Or evidence. Sarah wondered if there would ever be an end to the revelations, if she'd spend the rest of her life discovering new horrors about the man she'd loved. She thought about the journal entries she'd read, Michael Reeves writing about his growing attachment to his mark, to her. Had any of it been real? The gentle touches, the late-night conversations about their future, the way he'd held her when she'd told him about the pregnancy. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Jenny peered around the door, her eyes red-rimmed with worry. "Hey, you came." Sarah's voice cracked with relief. "Course I came." Jenny hurried to the bedside, wrapping Sarah in a fierce hug. "I drove straight through the night. Are you hurt? Is the baby—" "We're okay, physically." Sarah pulled back, searching her sister's face. "Jenny, there's so much I need to tell you. About David, about everything." "The police gave me some details." Jenny's expression darkened. "That bastard. I never trusted him, but this—" She shook her head. "We don't have to talk about it now. You need to rest." But Sarah found herself talking anyway, the words pouring out like water through a broken dam. She told Jenny about the hidden room, the photographs, the staged accident that killed David Chen, the real Michael Reeves. She described Marcus Chen's eyes when he'd cornered her, the cold calculation in his voice when he'd explained how he'd been hunting her husband for years. Jenny listened in stunned silence, occasionally squeezing Sarah's hand when the telling became too difficult. When Sarah finally finished, they sat together in the growing darkness, the weight of truth settling between them. "What will you do now?" Jenny asked quietly. Sarah had been asking herself the same question. The life she'd built was gone, revealed as an elaborate fiction. But growing inside her was something real, something that belonged entirely to her. "I don't know. Start over, I suppose. Try to figure out who I am when I'm not David's wife." "You're my sister," Jenny said firmly. "You're going to be an amazing mother. You're stronger than you know. What you survived today proves that." Sarah thought about the moments in the cabin when she'd fought back, when maternal instinct had overridden fear and given her the strength to protect her child. Maybe Jenny was right. Maybe strength she'd never known she possessed had been there all along. "The baby will ask questions eventually," Sarah murmured, "about their father. And when they're old enough, you'll figure out what to tell them. The truth, maybe, or a version of it that doesn't destroy their sense of security." Jenny tucked a strand of hair behind Sarah's ear. "You have time to decide." Time. Sarah placed both hands on her belly, feeling the subtle flutter of movement within. She would use that time wisely, to heal, to rebuild, to create something genuine from the ashes of deception. The cabin would be sold, its secrets buried with the investigation. She would find a new place to call home, somewhere unmarked by lies. As night settled fully outside the window, Sarah closed her eyes and felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. It was fragile, tentative, but real. Unlike everything else in her recent past, this feeling belonged entirely to her. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more revelations, more pieces of a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to complete. But tonight, she was alive, her baby was safe, and her sister was here. For now, that was enough.